on the outskirts of Guadalajara, in a humble little room in the San Juan de Dios neighborhood where the smell of old oil and worn-out hope mixed with the humid morning air, Raul lived. At his age, he had already spent 6 months unemployed. A heavy burden he felt on his shoulders every time he went out looking for work. He survived on the few pesos he had left, walking block after block to save on bus fare. His stomach almost always empty, but his pride intact. His passion for mechanics was the only inheritance from his father, a simple man who had taught him since childhood to listen to the soul of engines, to understand their language of pistons and spark plugs. Yet life had given him no opportunities. That passion now felt like a useless memory. Every night before sleeping, he remembered his father's words, "A man is worth what he does when no one is watching." That phrase was his only treasure, his moral compass, in a world that seemed to have closed every door on him that Tuesday morning. The sky over Guadalajara was covered with a layer of gray clouds that perfectly reflected his mood. But then the phone rang. It was an unexpected call from a workshop in Zapopan Rodriguez Premium Motors, a place specialized in luxury cars that Raul had only seen in magazines. It was perhaps his last real opportunity. He dressed in the best he had. Clean but worn jeans, simple shirt he ironed carefully, and work boots he polished until the tired leather recovered a bit of life while he waited in reception. The freezing air conditioning contrasted with the cold sweat running down his back. He felt out of place, a sparrow in a nest of peacocks. His hands, used to grease and hard work, trembled slightly on his knees as he admired the shiny cars around him. He prayed silently, asking for just one chance to prove his worth, to honor his father's memory, to escape the well of despair that consumed him day by day. Then, through the large glass window separating reception from the repair area, he saw something that froze his blood. A stunning, bright red Ferrari 4088. Spider was lifted on one of the platforms, and 2 experienced mechanics in spotless uniforms were working on its engine. But Raul, with his trained eye, immediately knew they weren't repairing anything. They were doing the exact opposite, working quickly and stealthily. They were disconnecting vital sensors, loosening parts that were in perfect condition, manipulating components to simulate severe problems that didn't exist. They were inflating a minor issue too, justify an exorbitant repair bill, a calculated scam to steal tens of thousands of pesos from the car's owner. Raul froze, his heart pounding in his throat. If he stayed silent, maybe he'd finally get the job he desperately needed. If he spoke up, they would throw him out on the spot. In the middle of this dilemma, the office door opened, and she walked in the Sabella Armenta, the owner of the Ferrari, a young, elegant woman with a firm posture that nonetheless couldn't hide her complete ignorance of mechanical matters. When the workshop owner, wearing a fake smile, began explaining the fraudulent estimate, Raul knew he couldn't stay quiet. He stood up, feeling his legs barely hold him, and walked toward her, a decision that could cost him everything, but also open a door to a destiny he never imagined. Before telling you what happened next, I want to ask you something from the heart. This channel is just beginning, and every person who subscribes is the engine that keeps us searching for and telling stories like Raul's. Your support isn't just a click, it's the fuel that allows us to grow and reach more people who need to hear that honesty still matters. If this story has already pulled you in, please subscribe and join us on this journey. Let's continue. The Armenta family's estate in Tequila wasn't just a place, it was another universe. The air smelled of wet earth and cooked agave, a sweet, deep aroma mixed with the imposing silence of the fields. For Raul, who came from the constant noise and smell of fried food in San Juan de Dios, arriving there felt like landing on another planet. The garages weren't garages, or climate-controlled pavilions with polished concrete floors that reflected the lights like a water mirror. Inside rested more than 20 automotive jewels, legends of metal and chrome, waiting for the right hands to awaken them. There was a '69 Chevrolet Chevelle with midnight blue paint so deep it seemed to swallow the light, a restored fastback Mustang that smelled of new leather and gasoline, and several classic Ferraris waiting with the patience of noble beasts. Raul, didn't feel intimidated. Hey, felt a profound sense of belonging. It was as if every engine he had disassembled in his backyard had prepared him for that exact moment. His first assignment was Taino 246 GT, an Italian beauty whose engine coughed with the sadness of a sick lung. Raul didn't just follow a manual. He sat next to the car for hours, listening to the irregular rhythm of the cylinders, feeling the vibrations in the chassis with his fingertips. For him, mechanics wasn't an exact science, but a conversation. You had to understand what the car was trying to say. He threw himself into the work with almost monastic devotion. From sunrise until the sun dipped behind the agave fields, staining the sky orange and purple, he barely ate, driven by an energy he didn't know he possessed. After a week, the dyno's engine didn't just work, it sang a powerful tuned melody, a purr that made the estate's old foreman take off his hat in respect. Isabella began visiting him at night. At first she came with the excuse of checking progress, but soon her visits became an expected routine for both. She would appear at the workshop door with 2 steaming cups of café de olla. Sitting on an old wooden bench while Raul cleaned his tools, their conversations started simple differences between a carburetor and fuel injection, but slowly shifted into personal territory. He told her stories about his father, how he taught him to find beauty in a motor full of grease, about the loneliness he felt since losing him. She confessed the immense pressure of carrying the Armenta name, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who saw her only as an heiress, a financial asset, not the woman who dreamed of simple things. In the quiet workshop, surrounded by cold engines, they found a human warmth missing from their worlds. With every car Raul brought back to life, another layer of Isabella's armor fell away. She saw in him pure honesty, genuine passions, so different from the artificial men her family pushed toward her. Especially Julian Del Valle, the suitor her mother had chosen, who talked about investments in yachts with calculated boredom, while Raul talked about engine timing with a sparkle in his eyes that she found mesmerizing. Their friendship slowly transformed into silent complicity, longer glances, unprovoked smiles. The invisible barrier of money and social class dissolved, replaced by a bridge built from trust and mutual admiration. But that connection didn't go unnoticed. Isabella's mother, Dr. Mira Armenta, was a woman of measured gestures and steel-gaze, a matriarch used to bending the world to her will. One afternoon she arrived at the estate unannounced and found Isabella and Raul laughing beside a half-restored Porsche 356, sharing a story with a closeness she found unacceptable. She said nothing, but her silence was louder than any scream. That night, she had a closed-door conversation with her daughter, a conversation whose words Raul never knew, but whose effect was devastating. The next morning, Isabella was another person. Her eyes were dull, her smile gone, an icy distance now separating them. No more night visits, no more coffee, no more deep conversations. The estate's atmosphere became heavy. Isabella avoided the workshop, and when they crossed paths, she barely looked at him. Responding to his greeting with a tense murmur, she began seeing Julian Del Valle more often, arriving in his luxury car, a display of status that turned Raul's stomach. He understood. He had become a problem, stain on the pristine Armenta lineage. The pain of seeing her so distant, so unhappy, was worse than anything he had ever faced. With a shattered heart but the same integrity that had made him speak up in the workshop, he made a decision. He wouldn't be the cause of her suffering, not the woman he had silently begun to love. He sat down and wrote a brief resignation letter, thanking them for the opportunity and explaining he had to leave for personal reasons. Before handing over the letter, he felt the need to say goodbye to the place that had given him purpose. He walked through. For the last time he walked between the cars, running his hand softly over the cold metal of their bodies. That was when he saw her inside the Ferrari dyno he had restored, the first proof of his worth. Isabella was curled up in the driver's seat, silently crying. Her sobs were muffled, as if she feared someone might hear her. Raul approached slowly and tapped the window gently. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She opened the door without saying a word. He sat beside her in the small cabin that smelled of leather and oil. She was the one who broke the silence. Her voice trembling. "I can't, Raul. I can't live a lie just to please my mother. Feeling this for you and having to pretend you don't exist is tearing me apart inside." In that moment, surrounded by old engines and the echo of their own confessions, all barriers fell. Raul said nothing. He simply lifted his hand and dried a tear from her cheek with the back of his calloused fingers. She leaned toward him, and in the dimness of the workshop, their lips met in a kiss that sealed everything they had never dared to say. It wasn't a movie. Kiss It was one charged with desperation relief, and a feeling so pure and powerful it seemed capable of moving the world. In the following weeks, they lived a clandestine love, stealing moments in the hidden corners of the estate, communicating with glances and gestures only they understood. They were two souls from opposite worlds who had found home in each other, as fragile refuge in the middle of a storm they knew was about to break, and the storm broke. One night, as they shared a fleeting embrace behind the stables under the pale moonlight, a shadow loomed over them. It was Dr. Mariah. Her face showed no surprise. It's only the cold confirmation of a suspicion. Her voice, when she spoke, cracked like a whip. So it was true. "How far you've fallen, Isabella." "And you," she stabbed Raul with her eyes, filled with contempt, an opportunist. "You thought you could seduce my daughter? A poor mechanic trying to secure his future. Your time here is over. Get off my property now." Isabella tried to defend him, but her mother silenced her with a single look. Raul, however, didn't react, not out of fear, but out of love. Out of the desire to protect Isabella from a family war that would destroy her. He accepted the humiliation. He nodded slowly, and without a word, turned around and walked toward the exit, feeling Isabella's gaze burning into his Bacca gaze, begging him to stay, but one he knew he needed to ignore for her own good. The poor mechanic who had stopped the workshop from scamming a millionaire, his life had changed forever. Months later, in a modest workshop in Tonala, the smell of grease and hot metal was Raul's only companion. The afternoon sun shone through the metal sheets of the roof, drawing stripes of light on the stained concrete floor. Every bolt he tightened, every engine he listened to, reminded him of the silence that had filled his life since he left the Armenta estate. He worked with his usual precision, but his soul was somewhere else. Lost in the memory of eyes that had seen him as no one else ever had, he had accepted defeat out of love, believing his absence was the only gift he could offer Isabella to protect her from her mother's wrath, a sacrifice that weighed on every breath. Suddenly, a sound broke the workshop's monotony. It wasn't the noise of just any engine, but a deep melodia Raul knew by heart. He looked up, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, and his heart stopped. There, parked in front of the humble entrance, was the classic Ferrari he had restored, its red paint glowing like an ember under the Jalisco sun. The driver's door opened, and Isabella stepped out. She wasn't wearing designer clothes or the jewelry she used for family meetings, but simple jeans and a white blouse. She looked more real, more free, and the look she gave Raul contained months of unsaid words. He froze, a wrench in his hand. Feeling the world around him fade, she walked toward him with a confidence he had never seen before. Confidence not born of her last name or fortune. She stopped a few steps away with a small, nervous smile. "I think the engine has a problem," she said. Her voice barely a whisper. Raul knew it was a lie. He knew every piece of that machine as if it were an extension of his own body. He approached slowly, opened the hood, and admired the perfection of the engine he had brought back to life. Not a single wire out of place, not a single leak. It was an excuse, the most beautiful excuse he had ever been given. When he lowered the hood, their eyes met, and in hers he saw the truth. Isabella took a manila envelope from her purse and handed it to him. Raul's grease-covered hands trembled as he took it. Inside weren't goodbye letters, but two official documents. The first was the title to that same Ferrari. Transferred entirely to his name, Raul Hernandez, he looked at her in disbelief, a knot in his throat preventing him from speaking. It was more than a car. It was a symbol of his work, his passion. the connection they had built in silence among tools and gasoline. "My father left me a letter," Isabella said, her voice full of emotion. "I found it a few weeks ago. He wrote that the only inheritance that truly matters isn't in banks, but in the courage to choose the person who feels like home. He said, true value isn't in preserving a last name, but in building an honest life. And my honest life, Raul, is you." Then she showed him the second document, the deed to a large industrial warehouse on the outskirts of Guadalajara. Attached was a partnership contract with a name already printed at the top. Armenta Hernandez Classics EY Lean.Wusher. Partnership to open a restoration workshop together. She looked at him, eyes filled with unshed tears and a will of steel. "I'm ready to start from zero, far from everything that was imposed on me. I want to build something real, something Arza, place where honesty is the main engine. But I can't do it alone. I need my partner. The man who taught me integrity is worth more than any fortune." Couldn't hold back anymore. The tears he had bottled up for months flowed down his cheeks, mixing with the dirt and sweat of his work. He dropped the documents onto a nearby table and embraced her with a strength that carried all the pain and hope of his life. In that embrace, in the middle of a humble workshop in Tonala, two worlds didn't just meet, they fused to create a new one. Months later, the workshop Armenta Hernandez Classics opened its doors. It wasn't an ostentatiously luxurious place, but a sanctuary for lovers of classic cars, a place where each vehicle was treated with the respect of a work of art. The news spread by word of mouth among collectors across Mexico, not only for the impeccable quality of Raul's work, but for the story behind it, the workshop, where truth triumphed over ambition. The place became a reference point, a symbol that passion and honesty can build the strongest of legacies. Years later, in a small, simple church in Atemajac de Brazuela, surrounded by a few true friends and the old estate manager, Raul and Isabella were married. There were no society photographers or magazine headlines, only the silent promise of two souls who had found their true home in each other. They had a daughter they named Luz, a girl with curious eyes and a bright smile who grew up among the sounds of V8 engines and the smell of fresh paint, learning from a young age that the true value of things didn't lie in their price, but in the history and love they carried. Often at night, while Luz slept and silence overtook the workshop, Raul would stare at the silhouettes of the classic cars under their covers. He remembered that cloudy morning in Zapopan, when he was just a poor, desperate mechanic about to give up everything. He thought of that moment of his decision to speak up, to defend a stranger without expecting anything in return, and understood that everything he had, his family, his work, his happiness, had been born from that single act of integrity. He realized his father's words were the greatest truth of all. Man is worth what he does when no one is watching. And that honesty, that invisible tool that cannot be bought or sold, was the only key capable of opening the doors that truly matter, the ones leading to a destiny money cannot buy. And so, with that life lesson, Raul leaves us. We reach the end of the story that reminds us of the incalculable value of integrity. Thank you, from the bottom of our hearts, for joining us on this journey, feeling with us the anguish, hope, and triumph of a man who clung to his principles when it seemed he had nothing left. Stories like this one bring us together and make us stronger. And that's why we would love to know from which city or country you're listening to us. Your voice matters to us. We would be delighted if you left us a comment telling us which part of Raul and Isabella's story moved you the most. Reading your words is what gives meaning to our work and motivates us to keep searching for stories that inspire the soul. If this message touched your heart, we humbly ask you to give us a like and subscribe to the channel. We are a community that is just beginning to grow, and every person who joins us becomes the fuel that helps us reach more hearts. If you know someone who needs a reminder that doing the right thing is always worth it, don't hesitate to share this video with them. Sometimes a single story is all it takes to light a spark on someone else's path. A simple thank you in the comments is also a gesture we receive with deep gratitude, one that fills us with strength for the journey ahead. Thank you for being part of this space we are building together. Always remember that a person's worth is not measured by what they have, but by the nobility of their actions, especially the ones no one sees. May life always find you with the strength to defend your truth, and the faith to know that even if the path is difficult, you are never alone. We will be here waiting for you, as always, in our next story. Take good care of yourself, and may you have peace in your heart and in your home.